that one, damn it. Ah!
Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all having a wonderful day today. Today, we're going to be taking a look at the Smith Wesson M&P 2.0 Compact. But before we get into the video, if you don't know, Gun Deals is a website where you can find links to some of the best products and prices in the industry. Whatever it is that you happen to be looking for, check out gun.deals first. They probably have a link to it for the best possible price. Now, they don't buy or sell anything. They don't take your money. They can only point you in the right direction. So again, whatever it is that you're looking for, go ahead and check out gun.deals. Now, with that out of the way, while you're here, go ahead and like, share, and subscribe, as all that is free and does help us out quite a bit. Also, go ahead and comment literally anything down below. Now, full disclosure on the Smith Wesson M&P 2.0 Compact is that we have no relationship with Smith Wesson whatsoever. Personally, I have not contacted them or heard anything from them whatsoever. This is actually only the first or second Smith & Wesson that I've ever shot, so I don't really have a relationship with the company. Usually for handguns, I usually shoot Glocks, or the Canic behind me is one of my favorite handguns right now. So overall, this will be kind of a first impressions of this M&P 2.0 in general, as I have very little experience with the platform. Now, getting into specifics on this one, this is the 4 1/4 inch version. They also make a 4-inch version, and they make models with dedicated thumb safeties. This model that we have here does not have the thumb safety, and it is the 4 1/4 inch version. Now, as you can probably tell, this is the optics ready model, which comes with their own optics plate system. Basically, they have a bunch of different plastic plates that you can use to adapt the cut to a bunch of different optics. Basically, any optic on the market that you want will probably fit on this slide. Now, also, this one came very nicely stock with suppressor height night sights. Now, these are actually metal night sights that are quite nice and usable. So if you pull these out in the dark, you'll actually see a very nice like green hue to them. So they're actually very visible. Now, this is not the core or performance center version. So this one here actually comes with the standard hinge trigger, which we will talk about. Some people tend to like it, some people dislike it. This being my first experience with it, I actually like it quite a bit. But let's go ahead and get into the frame first. We do have a frame mounted takedown lever here. You simply pull the slide back, push it down with your thumb, and then it comes off just like a Glock would. Now, getting into the frame itself, this is kind of a Glock 19 size frame in terms of its length. So this one here comes standard with 15 round magazines in the box. You get 2 15-round magazines. I wish it was 3, 4, or 5, though the magazines are fairly easy to source, and unfortunately they're like 30 or 40 bucks. Not the most expensive on the market, also not the cheapest on the market. Also in the box, if you want to use the full-size 17-round magazines, they have little adapter plates that would make them fit up perfectly with the grip if you wanted to use the larger 17-round magazines or other extended magazines on the market. Getting into the texturing on the grip, the place where your hands are going to spend the most time on the gun, this is something that they did very well. So the grip is undercut a little bit on the trigger guard, not super aggressive, but a little bit. Now, I have kind of like medium-sized, small-ish hands, and for my hands, they fit very nicely on the grip itself. So I have enough room to get my pinky on there, but if you have bigger hands, you might need a little bit more room, or to use one of those longer magazines with the little plastic insert to give yourself a full grip on the gun. Now, getting into the texture itself, as you can notice, this is a very fat grip. That is because I have the largest insert on the back. I was just playing around with them and put that on there, and it actually feels quite good. Though they have, I believe, 3 or 4 different sizes, anything from small to very large, to adjust the grip to your hands, which is nice. It's always nice to see them include those in the box. So for your hand types, big, small, or what have you, there is a grip insert that will fit your hands the best. Now, the best part about the grip is that the texturing on it is very, very aggressive. It is a very nice, very grippy texture, almost like a very rough sandpaper-ish feeling on it, which means that when you're really locked into the grip and gripping it tightly, it does not move whatsoever. Whether it's wet, you're sweaty out, The grip texturing itself is very good. Probably the best that I've felt on like a stock, factory gun that doesn't cost, thousands of dollars. Because again, you can pick these up for around $500, especially if you find a good link on gun.deals. Now, one thing about the texturing, while it is excellent, I do wish they had a bit more of it. Almost all these factory guns, even the ones with great texturing, they put it and then they stop about 80% up the grip or 70% up the grip. And I wish they would really just continue that up and maybe a little bit where you would put your thumbs as well. I really would prefer that because the grip texturing is excellent. Again, I just want more of it. So while it is a very minor downside, the grip texture is again excellent. I do just wish they would put that in more places because again, it is very good. Now, the trigger guard itself is not what I would call an enlarged trigger guard. There is plenty of room in there, though again, depending on your fingers and if you're using like a big winter glove or something like that, you might have a little bit of a harder time getting into it. There's no texturing or anything on the trigger guard itself. I know some people like to do that thing where they wrap their finger around the trigger guard itself. I don't shoot like that, so it's not a big deal for me, but if you're a fan of the squared off trigger guards, this is not going to have that. Now up front, we do have a standard Picatinny rail, which I prefer. Just give me a standard Picatinny rail. It doesn't need to be some sort of special proprietary block. I prefer standard Picatinny, and it is going to fit basically any light on the market because again, it is just a standard Picatinny rail section. Now for my hands with the largest insert, the magazine release is a little bit hard to reach, though again, that's just because I'm playing around with the biggest grip insert. You of course should use the one that fits the best with your hands. I believe the magazine release is reversible, so if you're left-handed and you like to use a left-handed magazine release, that is a very nice feature for you. As far as the magazine release itself is concerned, it does use a quite good amount of pressure, so you're not going to be accidentally depressing it. It's also fairly low profile, which again, this is more of a dedicated like concealed carry or duty style of gun. So I'm not necessarily concerned with having a huge oversized magazine release for the fastest 1R1 splits possible. It is definitely usable and there's a little bit of texture on it, but it's going to be a little bit more low profile than some others on the market, whether that's a good or bad thing for you. Now getting into the slide stop and slide release, they are ambidextrous and it's actually quite enlarged, which is nice for hitting them after reloads. I thought it might be a bit of an issue if I was having issues with my normal fairly high grip of accidentally holding it up and locking the slide back accidentally, but it has not been an issue. And on top of that, I have not had an issue with it being oversized and not locking back the slide because I was accidentally putting downward pressure on it. Sometimes with a Glock, depending on the Glock, how I'm gripping it, so on and so forth, I can have a bit of issues of accidentally riding the slide stop and therefore keeping it from locking back on the last round. However, with this, just right out of the box with no prior experience with the M&P series of guns, it's worked very well, and it does give you quite a good amount of surface area to press down on it and get that slide back into action when you need it. Now, the last thing to talk about on the frame is actually going to be the hinge trigger. Now, the hinge trigger is a little bit divisive online. You have people who like the hinge triggers, and you have people that absolutely hate them and think that an Apex kit is absolutely required to get the most out of a gun. And while I don't deny that the Apex trigger kit is probably very nice, I actually think that this hinge trigger in the 2.0 is actually very good and a little bit better to a lot better than what you would find in like a stock Glock. Now, this is my Glock 17 Gen 3. This is by no means a stock Glock whatsoever. This has a solid brass trigger shoe, which is very nicely machined by a kind gentleman, a kind viewer of my channel. However, it uses the stock disconnector and stock sear spring. So while the trigger pull and trigger shoe itself is quite nice, the overall weight is still at about 6 to 7 pounds with a rolling brake, whereas the hinge trigger on the M&P 2.0 has the same amount of take-up. You hit a very defined wall, and there's a tiny bit of rolling brake, and then instead of like 7 pounds, let's say, this is about 6 pounds or so. Now, the weight is very similar on the two triggers, but the brake is much nicer, at least, again, on this specific gun. So while the trigger is still heavy and definitely what I would consider a duty or a self-defense style of trigger, it's not going to be winning any, matches for accuracy or speed or anything like that. The trigger pull itself, with a crisp, clean enough break for a striker-fired handgun is definitely a little bit more accurate for my hands personally than like a stock Glock trigger, even though this one here is not a stock Glock trigger. But overall, I actually found that this gun, just with the trigger combined with the very good ergonomics of the grip itself, was very, very accurate right out of the box. I was able to hit, standing shots at 100 yards, no problem. And I was able to break the shot exactly when I wanted to. Yes, it's still a fairly heavy trigger, a fairly, duty or concealed carry style of trigger, but the way that it breaks seems to be a little bit more intuitive and repeatable than what I have gotten out of stock Glocks. And that's coming from somebody who's fired, 10,000 plus rounds on this specific handgun right here, and only a couple hundred on the Smith Wesson M&P 2.0 compact. Now, I don't want to get too much into a comparison because I believe we will actually do a dedicated comparison video between the M&P 2.0, Glock 17, and the Canic behind me as well. And we will get much deeper into the weeds about all of the differences between the guns. But suffice it to say that the hinge trigger on the M&P 2.0 is what I would consider adequate or even good for a duty style of trigger. Now, getting into the slide itself, we of course have Smith & Wesson's kind of scalloped receiver cuts or slide cuts, which are quite usable. They look very nice. They feel very good. They're very grippy. It's very easy to get enough leverage on the slide with or without gloves. They feel very good. The machining on the slide itself is done quite well. The accuracy on the gun, again, I was able to hit reduced size targets out to 100 yards or 120 yards, no problem. So while I might be able to get 2 or 3 inch groups at 10 yards, better shooters are going to be able to do much better than I can. Now, one thing that I will absolutely knock the M&P 2.0 for is that it has a witness port on the top of the barrel so that when you have a round in the chamber, you can very quickly see it. It's nice to have that visual cue. However, this little witness port, as you can probably tell, sits right in front of the glass on your optic. Now, since I've had this, I put a couple hundred rounds through it, and it absolutely smoked the lens of the Holosun 507C that I have mounted currently. What that means is that you get a very dirty glass very quickly. Just a couple hundred rounds is going to smoke it pretty bad. It's still going to be usable, but you're definitely going to want to clean that up. And if you were doing like a long range session or a class or something like that, where you're shooting 500, 600, 700 rounds at a time, you're definitely going to be cleaning that several times throughout the day. And that is mostly because of that witness hole on top. Now, again, comparing it very quickly again, this is a ported Glock 17. Without that witness hole on top, this you can shoot for thousands of rounds without cleaning the glass. Whereas this one here, you're going to want to clean it every couple hundred rounds or so. So it's a minor obnoxious thing. It's the trade-off of, yes, you get that very easy visual representation that the gun is loaded. However, you could, of course, just check to see if the gun is loaded and therefore verify it that way. And instead, you have a witness hole that gunks up the front of your lens. Not a big deal, but it is something to note. Now, getting into the standard sights on this M&P 2.0, they are, as I mentioned earlier, suppressor heights and night sights. Now, as far as the actual sight picture itself goes, it's a very simple 3-dot sighting system. So you have a white dot up front, 2 white dots in the back, of course, and you have a square notch in the rear. Now, the sight picture within the optic window is definitely a lower 1/3. They do co-witness nicely, but it's definitely in the lower third of the glass or lower quarter of the glass, honestly. The sight picture itself is fine. There's a little bit of windage left and right in there, so you can kind of refine your aim if you wanted to. Personally, I prefer a high-vis front and then blacked out rears, but again, for a standard sights that come with the gun, being suppressor height, which means that they will co-witness with the optics-ready platform, and the fact that the front sight is a night sight means that I am very happy with it. Now, getting into the optics mounting system, it's nice in the fact that you can mount just about any optic that you want to it, and it comes with basically every screw combo under the sun in the actual box itself, which is, again, very nice. The problem with that is that none of the sights fit particularly well. Currently, I have this mounted up with a Holosun 507C on the, I forget, the RMR plate, I believe. And while it does meet up very nicely here in the rear, it kind of has a gap in the front. So instead of nestling it perfect within the cut itself, it's really only perfect at the back, and then it has a bit of gap up front. So again, it's going to depend greatly on what optic you choose, and certain optics are going to fit a lot better with their plate system within the actual optic cut itself. And since most people are probably going to be throwing on a Holosun optic, since at this point they're pretty much agreed upon as the best value pistol red dots on the market, they provide an exceptional amount of performance at a good price. So as far as an optic plate system goes, it's fine. It is nice that it is compatible again with just about every optic that you can find out there. I do wish it was a little bit more secure, and an alleviation to this problem is probably the aftermarket. You can probably find a specific adapter plate for a specific optic for this slide so that it will fit perfectly and be very, very secure. Now, with all of that out of the way, we can actually talk about how it performed. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, it shot very, very nicely. When I was shooting this gun, I really didn't have any complaints about the recoil impulse, the pointability, the shootability. It was very natural to get behind, and I was able to shoot very quickly, very accurately, transition well with it. I felt that the balance of recoil was very nice. It's nothing special in that regard. Really, the performance difference between this and like a standard Glock in terms of recoil control is going to be very similar. It's really kind of going to be a personal preference there, which one you like more. I like the trigger here a little bit more. I like the grip texturing more for sure than a stock Glock or even the Canic as well. I do think the grip texturing on here is quite well. The only thing for me personally that holds back the shooting dynamics on this is going to be the reset on the trigger. So while I think the trigger pull is slightly better, the break is slightly better than like a stock Glock trigger, the reset is actually kind of bad. So you have a much longer, it's like twice as long as a Glock reset trigger. So while the break is a little better, a little crisper, which is the more important part of the trigger pull, to be honest, there were some times where, again, because I have a lot more experience with Glock style triggers and short resets, where I would have a bit of trigger freeze, and so I would not fully reset the trigger, and I would be sitting there staring at the target, like pulling the trigger, like, why isn't it going off? And it's because I did not fully reset the trigger. Now, that's just going to be a time and training issue. The more time that I get with this gun, the more hopefully that problem just disappears over time with enough training.
Failure to reset on that, not the gun's fault, that was me. I just felt bad on one of those. I didn't quite reset it far enough. Once again, that was a failure to reset on my part. I'm thinking it's a Glock trigger with a super short reset. So that's just a training thing. Man, it's like laser beam, like accurate, super easy to break the shots exactly when I want it. But again, I had that trigger freeze issue. Not the gun's fault. Well, I bobbled the reload, but the accuracy on the gun combined with the red dot is very, very good.
Now, as far as reliability goes on the M&P 2.0, again, I only have a couple hundred rounds through it right now, so I can't talk about it long-term durability or long-term reliability. But so far, it has been perfect. We used a couple hundred rounds in total, and I believe most of that was Tula 115 grain, as well as some Norma 124 grain, and then some 115 grain Scorpio as well, I believe. And again, it performed flawlessly. There were absolutely no issues whatsoever. We pretty much just took it out of the box and shot it quite a bit, and it performed very, very well. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we are going to be doing some comparison videos between the M&P 2.0, the Glock 17, and the Canic behind me as well, and kind of do a little bit of compare and contrast and kind of give you guys the pros and cons of each model and which ones you should buy depending on what you're looking for. So we will be shooting this quite a bit more, hopefully, and of course, giving you feedback and updating its performance as we go. The first impressions on the gun are that it is an exceptionally good value. I believe these, again, can be found for the low $500 marks, which for a gun that comes with suppressor height, night sights, and an optics cut from the factory with excellent texturing and ergonomics, overall, that is a very, very good deal. Not quite as good of a deal as the Canic, though those are again about $100 cheaper. But of course, you are getting an American-made handgun with a very good track record. So as far as my first impressions go on the M&P 2.0 compact, they are very good, and I'm excited to continue to shoot this. Now, with all of that out of the way, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you guys think of the Smith & Wesson M&P 2.0 in the comments down below. And with all of that out of the way, guys, thank you once again for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace out.